discussion. With me right now, Mike Falvo. He'll be joining me up here today to handle all this, along with Dan Severn, Bill Apter, Booker T, and Bushwhacker. Bill, anything you want to say before we get started? Because I know how you are. You like to talk a lot, so anything you want to say in advance?
So I just want to thank all of you for being here, and you're all having such a great time. Yes. And Seth Turner, I want to thank you on behalf of the entire Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame universe. I'm going to use that word for making this all possible. You and your crew, Mike, Lenato, and everybody involved. This is a fabulous thing, and we look forward to this every year. So thank you. Let's do it. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Seth. I know I'm the only one doing it. That's all right.
Thank you. We got some true legends up here, and last year we tried to actually go into and tell you about each and every one of them. Truth is, you already know what you need to know about these guys. So what we're going to do is let them talk about different stories, but we're also going to take questions from you because I think you'd rather hear what you have questions for. Correct? Yep. Everybody's shaking their head. Mike Falvo, you take this, and I'll go up there with the mic.
Thank you, Mac. Let's hear it for Mac Davis, everybody. So do we want to start with some stories? Do we want to take some questions, or
Questions?
want to open it up? All right,
Raise
let's
your
open it up
hand
to the
and
crowd.
let's...
Anybody got a question? Raise your hand. There we go. Your name?
Hello, my name's Tim, and obviously a huge wrestling fan for a long time. This question's for Booker T. Just kind of curious, what was the whole story with you and your brother having to break up in WCW? Was that something they came to you guys with? Or is that something you guys discussed amongst yourselves and like, hey, listen, let's try singles and see where we can go?
That's a good question. That's a question never been asked before. No, my brother and I, we were, we never thought we were going to break up or anything like that. We never talked about it or anything like that, but we were doing a Disney taping when we used to come to Orlando and film the morning shows. And my brother tagged in, and he came in the ring, and boom, he went right down. He tore the muscle in the bottom of his foot, and he was going to be out for a few months. And it was like, don't book her in a few singles matches, and then they threw me in a couple of matches, and people was like, whoa, wait a minute, this guy may have something. He may could be a singles wrestler. And then I think Disco Inferno, they had to take the title off of him, and they was going to put it on Rick Martel. And Rick Martel had forgot his wrestling gear. He just thought he was coming to a promo. So they said, well, we're going to put the title on Booker T, but you're going to drop it to Rick Martel in a couple of weeks. And I was like, if you put that title on me, you're never going to get it back. Pretty much, that was the beginning of my singles run. But it was all because my brother got hurt. But he gave me his blessing. And he said, to go out there and, to be the best I possibly could be.
What's the latest with Stevie? We haven't heard much from him lately. Is he still out there working?
I really can't tell you. My brother and I, we haven't spoken in about 2 years.
Wow.
And hopefully, to work itself out sooner or later.
Let's hope so. Anybody else? Question? Wow, this is going to be a fast panel discussion here.
Luke, tell us whatever happened to your Bushwhacker partner, Butch Miller.
Which is alive and kicking in New Zealand. New Zealand has been locked down up to 2 months ago. It's the last country to open up, and he's been going to come over here since 2019, 2020. But due to the COVID, the place is closed up. He couldn't get away, so we're looking forward to bringing him over here next March, April, for to travel around the country and to do signings everywhere. He's never done a signing in the States. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Who's that? Butch.
Butch.
Oh, Butch. He never did a signing.
Yes, sir.
No, we worked independent. After WWE 217, 280, 290, we did shows together, independent shows, and we signed photos at half time. But we never worked any, there wasn't conventions around then. Nothing happened. 2000 era, it's all opened up.
Yeah.
So, Luke, could you tell these people a story that I've started to hear a little bit?
you and J.J. Dillon, when we were here last year, you walked in the room and you started to tell me about J.J. booking New Zealand in the 1970s. And that's not written about in a lot of history books. So could you tell us about James J. Dillon and what he was doing in New Zealand in the 1970s?
I'm going to start a bit before that, Seth. I first saw Jim Dillon up in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick area in 1972-73. I was working for a family, the French, Emile Dupree, and he was working for the Burkes, or what was their last name? Cormier family. That's Theo Burke, the Beast. There was 4 of them. And that's where I first saw Jim. Then I was up there I came back to New Zealand in 75, 76 to do television on the mat, and Jim was there then, and he was booking for New Zealand as a booker. So then we had a lot of fun on the road. We got a lot of stories about that with different characters we had there. Good times. Right, Jim?
Yes, that was Frenchie.
Frenchie, I'll tell you one story. You ever remember Frenchie Martin? He was Dino Bravo's manager. Okay, we lived all stationed in Wellington, the capital. Auckland was about 250 miles away. And we'd go up there and do the YMCA on a Saturday night, or on a Monday night or Tuesday night, whatever. Anyhow, we used to get a motel and stay in motels at that time around the country. And this gentleman in Auckland always took care of us. He had a beautiful motel, and he had barbecue things outside. So we used to barbecue. Well, in the afternoon before the show. And this situation, Frenchie was driven up during the day, and of course the New Zealand promoter used to get on the plonk, on the piss, alcohol. He'd drink all the way up from Wellington to Auckland and that, and of course his side mate was Frenchie Martin. He loved to drink too. And we got to the motel, Frenchie lay down for a while, and then we'd gone out and got the groceries and everything for the barbecue, and we were outside cooking. We called Frenchie out to come out and eat with us outside when it was prepared. He forgot to open the sliding glass doors and walk right through them. Yeah, lucky. We had a big show that night in Auckland. Auckland being the largest city in New Zealand. Yeah, but lucky, I don't know whether we had to take him to hospital to get someone up or not. Another time with Frenchie too. Hey, this guy, if you knew him, he was wild. Another time, he was the main event in the capital city for the Commonwealth Championship and that. And it was about the 3rd or 4th match, and there was no Frenchie in the arena. So we had to go out. We found him in a bar. And leaning on the bar, right, Jim? And we had to bring him back and that, and he went in the ring. And there's quite a few stories about Frenchie in the matches there. Yeah, we had to pull him back, shower him, and get him in the ring.
Anybody else? Question? No? Dan, I'm curious. Dan Severn's with us. Dan, your first professional wrestling match, can you tell us about that match?
My first professional wrestling match was actually inside of a correctional facility. Yes.
Were you the...
My training was with Al Snow at Bonnie Slammer's gym, and he was teaching me all about the psychology of that. And now I'm about to this show that's taking place inside of a prison. And all of the psychology that he's told me about, none of it worked because all of the inmates were cheering the heels and were booing the baby faces. So literally, after that match, Elle and I had a very good laugh because everything was in reverse psychology that day. But that was my very first taste of professional wrestling 101, doing a match, a yard show of all things. And you get the guards there standing around with their guns and things of that nature. But like I said before, everyone was booing the baby faces and were cheering the heels.
I want to know who promoted that show.
Yes.
So Dan, I have a question for you as well. When you made the transition from mixed martial arts into professional wrestling, was it a difficult transition for you, or was it something that just seemed natural?
No, it was definitely something different for me because being an amateur wrestler, a lot of my matches that took place overseas, I was so used to tuning out the crowd because there's a lot of people in other countries that do not like Americans for a lot of different reasons. A lot of it's just the propaganda that their country spews about America. So I was so used to tuning out the audience. Well, in professional wrestling, you have to be in tune with that audience. And each area is a little bit different. As to, you have a basic idea of what the flow of the match is supposed to be in that. But as you're working different types of techniques and that, you have to listen to that crowd to see what are they responding to, and all of a sudden you realize, okay, we sparked something here, let's come back to this again down the road, let's come back into again down the road, so you can build up that momentum and that excitement for a match. So that was the hardest part, was that transition to tuning out, then to having to tune right back on in. But you'd be surprised, by learning that psychology, because I always tell people, my first profession was as a professional wrestler. And I didn't jump, and that was as of the 92 Olympics, and then by 1994 I jumped into the Ultimate Fighting Championships. I used a lot of that same psychology then in my cage fighting career, to where now I had the audience behind me. I knew how to sway the audience one way or the other into things, to cheer this, to boo that, to get my opponent to be, I'm literally slowing the match down. Now the crowd's starting to boo the match. Now my opponent he's got to be more aggressive than come after me to try to entertain the folks. I'm thinking, entertain the folks? I'm here just to beat you. I don't care about entertaining folks. And the entertainment will be the moment that I beat you and do whatever after antics at that point in time. But the thing is, I use that as a psychological type tool inside of matches. So, great question. I appreciate you asking. I always try to tell people that I was an athlete with the brain. Try to make sure that I didn't get my brains beat out of me in the process.
Bill, you're quite used to BWI and the old Apter mags, which you say is not really Apter mags. But back then, the wrestling reporting was much different than it is today. Today, we hear more behind the scenes. What are your thoughts on today's reporting of professional wrestling?
That's a great question. Kevin McElhaney is the current editor of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Raise your hand, don't. He's the current editor of Pro. And my days of Pro Wrestling Illustrated were like my favorite days, because we were the internet before the internet. We did sometimes 6 or 7 wrestling magazines and 4 boxing magazines in a period of once a month. I mean, it was like a production house. I was out there, everybody calls them the Apter mags. Well, they weren't. They were Stanley Weston's magazines, but Dave Meltzer said, well, you're the guy they see on TV all the time, so that's why he called them the Apter mags, and they stuck. But reporting back then, what we did, rather than what's done on the internet mainly today, is we didn't do the backstage stuff unless it was something we may have created that a promoter wound up using as well. We went with the storylines, or something about somebody like, is Booker T wanting to wrestle Stevie Ray, that would be something on a cover that would be compelling. We were kind of like a Sports Illustrated of professional wrestling, but we wanted to be intriguing, and that's what sold it. For example, we would come up with questions like I asked Booker today, and I think I'd like to ask everybody on the panel this. What was your single or tag team dream match? And Booker had one that blew me out of the water. Booker, would you mind telling them what your single dream and your tag team one?
Yeah, for me it was Shawn Michaels, because I never got a chance to wrestle Shawn Michaels in a singles match. Got a chance to do tag team stuff with him, but my brother and I, we always consider ourselves tough guys, but we love Doom, and we always wondered how would we have fared with Doom, and I'm kind of glad we didn't find out. But, that was the match that I always think about.
Bushwhacker. Are you talking about Doom The whole Road Warriors.
No, Doom, Ron Simmons and Butch Reed.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, those guys
Boy.
are killers.
What
I worked with them. Throughout Europe.
Yeah.
I think they felt sorry for us because they were easy brothers. So that, but the Clothesline from Hell.
Yeah.
That was two guys that, boy, what a reputation they got.
Yeah.
I think Vince put them against anyone that he thought was getting a bit big-headed. Because they'd take that bloody head off. Now, a dream match, you know, I had a lot of different teams and that, and my, I gotta say, not my best matches weren't in the WWE. You know, mine were when I was a sheep herder. I had longer runs with matches because we had long programs and we built them up to a peak. You know, not like today where they start the program and start a little thing at the start of the show, the end of the 3-hour show, they're blowing it off because they're chasing ratings. But back in those days, you know, I had good runs even with the Road Warriors. I tell you the first time I worked with the Warriors, I don't know whether people here last time, I think I may have told that, but we were in Waco, Texas, and that's well known for something else, Waco, Texas. Anyhow, Paul Aaron comes to us, he says, this is the 83, and they've only been on television for a short while, and Oldie's not told them it's a work. They're running over people. People come to the studio in Turner Studios and see their names against the Road Warriors. They grab their bags and leave the studio. You know, when they saw themselves wrestling against them, because they knew how they were. Anyhow, they come to Texas, and that we did a thing with Joe Blanchard, where he's bringing teams in to get rid of the sheep herders. And he bought the Road Warriors in. And Paul comes to me at the back. You know, we had separate side dressing rooms, and he says, you know, we're heels from Atlanta, you know, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I don't think you'll be heels here tonight. Anyhow, we start the match, and of course, they were the baby faces. When they came out, the people popped with, you know, their music, which is a big opener for them. And then we started the match, and about 4 minutes into the match, they used to go 4 or 5 minutes. But 4 minutes into the match, Hawk goes over to the ropes and pukes into the crowd. And the kid in the front row says, look, Daddy, just like a boogie, but it's got chunks in it. And we got that on television, believe it or not. Yeah, anyhow, because we switched all the time, fast switch. And then when we switched, one of us would hold their legs while the other one would knock them down. And they weren't used to that. They were used to running through people. But that was their first introduction with us. And we had a good run with them. And that's, now, two little guys who we had a greatest run. We had, you know, the Rock and Roll Express. And we had the fabulous ones, which was Stan Lane and Steve Kern. We worked all over the South with them. But two little guys who were wrestlers, but we turned them into fighters, was Bobby Fulton and his partner,
Tommy Rogers.
Tommy Rogers. Little guys with big hearts, and boy, we drew money all over the South with them. You know, of course they were good looking, good bodies, the women loved them, passed them under the US flag. Of course we had we had the Kiwi flag, New Zealand flag, which always helped. And then we had one hell of a run for maybe 6 months with them. And that was one hell of a run.
We got a question now for Booker and Dan.
By the way, Bushwhacker, the sheep herder matches were amazing. The hardcore for hardcore.
You know, it's funny, most people don't realize
Thank you, guys.
he was hardcore long before he became the WWE kind of the
we were known as hardcore before hardcore became a name brand.
Can we get a He's Hardcore chant going?
And going back in the 70s, we started doing fire matches and barbed wire cage matches in South America. You know, because those countries, you know, the Latins, they know blood and guts. And that's what we did. We gave it to them, what they wanted.
It was in Puerto Rico, right?
Yes.
Booker, when WCW was sold, what was the vibe on that last Nitro? What were you feeling? What were your emotions? Like,
Oh man, it was a sad day. A lot of guys never saw that coming. A lot of guys thought WCW would be there forever. You know, thought there would be big stars forever too. You know, a lot of guys were relaxing because they were making a lot of money. But for me, I lost my dad when I was 10 months. Lost my mother when I was 13. I know nothing lasts forever. Okay, so when it was shut down, there was a lot of sad people, a lot of drinking, a lot of guys getting drunk. And I remember one guy, he asked me, because he was crying, he was really sad, and tears coming out. He goes, "Booker, man, this is it. It's the last night, man. Save the WCW." He say, "What are you gonna do, man?" I said, "I'm going to WWF."
You took a gamble, as a matter of fact, to go to the WWF.
Well, I always was willing to gamble on myself. At that point in time, I could have stayed off for like another year, collected money from WCW. I still had, a contract. But I took a 50% buyout to go to WWF just because I felt like, I felt like I was talented. I felt like I could make it. I felt like if I had everything worked out right, the money that I lost, I would make that back just like that. And there again, it was a gamble, but I felt like I was prepared. I always say preparation is the only luck you're ever going to have in life. And when that company closed down, I was prepared to go and work with the best workers in the world. And a lot of those guys was in the WWE.
And obviously the gamble paid off.
Yeah.
that may be one of the best world champions. I can't wait to see them never be. I just can't, honestly. Dan, two-part
Hold on one
question.
second, just
Yeah,
want to
no
add to
problem.
that, the shock of your face when Eric Bischoff, did you know prior to them showing that on TV that he was there?
No, I did not.
Because your reaction was so genuine.
Be there. That was just totally out of the norm. I never thought they would give Bischoff a job. That was the look on my face. What the hell is going on here?
So natural.
Yeah.
Dan, two-part question here. The angle between you and Owen Hart where he power drove you and you did the whole...
That actually was an angle.
Oh, that was, I'm asking you, was that an angle?
Well, it was supposed to be, but I don't know if it's because I was so much more heavier than what he might have expected. Owen used to always put like baby oil and stuff like that on his arms and chest, stuff like that to make the muscles glisten. I might have slid a little bit too further south. All I know is that I did take full impact on that. And I mean, literally, I felt the bolt of lightning run down my spine, run down my leg, and even as it was all set up to be as an injury angle, but as I laid there in the fetal position, because that was all part of the gimmick there, I tried to wiggle my fingers to see, hey, can I still wiggle my fingers? Can I wiggle my toes without bringing any, notice me, the backboard, the neck brace, that was all set up into this, but they put me on that stuff. And when they carted me back beyond the curtain, well, I ended up getting off of it. At that point, well, during the course of that match, Owen realized he had screwed up. And so he was trying to keep quiet with the audience right there, and he kind of whispered. He reached down and grabbed my hand and said, "If you're okay, squeeze my hand." I didn't squeeze his hand. But when he got back behind the curtain, and he saw me get off the backboard, he comes over and goes, "Why didn't you squeeze my hand?" Well, that's when I sort of kind of went off my rocker, and I grabbed him. I go, "Why did you drop me for real?" I go, the number one rule of professionals, and all these athletes up here will attest to this, you take care of me and I will take care of you. The name of the game is we're there to entertain, and we're trying to make this as realistic as possible. There already is we know who's going to come out the victor in this. You look at the formula of WWF, they were doing weekly shows that led to monthly pay-per-views, and you had to have half a dozen different storylines because people were getting hurt legitimately. And these pay-per-views are built upon this, and as the old story goes, the show must go on. We might lose this match here or match there, but the show goes on. So,
You being a multi-time UFC champion, what would you consider your best and favorite championship as far as UFC?
I mean, well, again, to take away from what you just said, pay tribute to literally my amateur wrestling background is what actually opened up all my other doors for me. I accelerated the sport of wrestling. A lot of people don't realize I actually have 7 other brothers and sisters. I am son number 2 on the totem pole. To ask my parents for money to go to college never entered my mind because they're already feeding and clothing 8 children. By my sophomore year in college, a couple college coaches came up to my brother and I because they saw potential in us, and they're like, keep up the good work. They actually thought that my brother and I were twins, but I just feel I was a little bit bigger than what my older brother was. But I'm a big believer that create options for yourself. So my first thought was I had some friends that had older siblings. Upon high school graduation, they went into the military for 4 years, came on out, and went to college on the GI Bill. So that actually was my first option, was I'm going to do this route. But by my sophomore year, now I have this potential of college scholarship money, going to college on a full scholarship for athletics. So by my sophomore year on, it's kind of like going, let's start to exercise option number 2. I got this option, let's exercise option number 2. And I really aggressively went after more freestyle matches, more Greco-Roman matches, and just doing things that nobody else had ever done. And the utopia is going in one day, doing 3 different weight classes in my age group of junior, which means 18 years and younger, 198, 220 in heavyweight weight class, and then going into the open age category, the same 3 weight classes, 198, 220 heavyweight. Typically, at the upper weights, you just didn't get as many people, you just never saw as many matches. I still remember the day that I did that. As I'm leaving there, the couple referees that were doing the weigh-ins, the nature of the charts, they literally were laughing and making like a mockery that this kid is nuts. But as that day progressed, again, this was my investment into, can I get more colleges to notice me? And as the day progressed, most gymnasiums only held 3 wrestling mats. I could be wrestling on mat number 1, and they'll be calling me, Dan Severn must report to be on deck on mat number 2. Dan Severn is now in the hole on mat number 3. And the moment that they simply announced Dan Severn must report to mat number 2, the clock starts. 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes to report, otherwise automatic disqualification. So I might be on mat number 1 wrestling, knowing I got to pin this guy. Simply just to grab my gear, my water bottle, my gear, my towel, wipe down, sipping my water, and then go into mat number 2, knowing I gotta pound this guy down, then to get to mat number 3. So that literally, as that day went on, more and more people were watching. They're like going, this, first off, the referees, this kid's crazy. Then they're like going, this kid's doing it. He's doing this. This could be what a machine. And then I was by myself. I had no coaches in my corner. This is a freestyle wrestling tournament that I'm doing. And people are running. I mean, I've got coaches and referees that are running to the payphone. That's the thing that used to be out in the lobby. And they're making phone calls like, oh, this kid is doing this. After that day was done, I had every college coach going after me, and I made my mark. But again, I go back, my amateur wrestling career is what opened up all my doors to where it opened up. Going in the Ultimate Fighting Championships, I did not have a fighting career. I've never been in a fight in my entire life, but I've been a competitor my entire life. And I always told people that in the Ultimate Fighting Championships, I was a one-trick pony. I'm a grappler. I am never going to win any of these matches by my fisticuffs. This isn't going to happen. But as a striker, you get one chance to pop me with the hand, knee, elbow, fist, whatever. And the moment that opportunity has been missed, I'm going to clinch you, I'm going to take you down, or I'm going to have you jammed up against that cage wall, and my arsenal is just beginning.
As Bill mentioned earlier, I'm from Georgia, so one of the managers I grew up with was J.J. Dillon. As far as I'm concerned, probably one of the best managers we've ever had. J.J., you had a lot of things to do with the Four Horsemen, and you had to handle a lot of things. I'm curious, behind the scenes, what was it like for you with those guys? Did you book rooms and flights and everything else for these guys?
Yeah, for the first time I grew, I've been a manager, but a manager is just somebody who was in the corner, an antagonist, an added ingredient to the match. But once I was with the Horsemen, for the first time, I was taking care of everybody else, all the detail stuff. Which a lot of guys did that on their own, but for convenience, because I had done it so much, you know, coordinating travel and everything, and I enjoyed that and was successful doing that.
We got another question?
Well, first, I have a question for Luke, but I just want to make a comment. If you've not read JJ's book, you know, Why Are Wrestlers Like Seagulls, I'll guarantee it's a great read, and you will definitely enjoy it. Very good book.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Scott Teal deserves a lot of credit. He had done Ole's book, and then talked to me about doing my life story. And at that point in my career, I remember the first conversations were, well, I don't think I have enough material to be able to fill a book. And so he kept calling me, and he would tell me that there's so many things that you've done in your career that when you tell all those stories, and they can be all different things, because a book is not a diary. If you read somebody's diary, that would be very boring, but you know, you've had so many various experiences that you know, and that's where Scott Teal had a gift of being able to take what might be somebody's diary and break it down into chapters that made for interesting reading. And then Philip Burriell, who I had never met, who was somebody who took, Scott and I would have conversations over the phone, chapter by, first it was done almost like a diary, but where he would ask questions and then I would, you know, expound on, and then he would take all that recorded and send it up to Philip, who knew more about me than I knew about myself. And Philip would then listen to it, and he would come back with comments and say, well, you know, this particular thing was impactful in your career, and when you went through that period of time, you never even mentioned that. And it's like, oh, you know, you're absolutely right. And then I would go back and fill pieces in, which is why when I actually, when my life story was published, it was, it was very important to me. And I, you know, Scott Teal is an author, and they're very protective of, you know, by that on the cover of the thing. And I said to him, I said, Philip took all of our recordings and came back to me for clarification on some of the things, or some of the things you can listen to somebody on a recording, and what you hear in their ears was not your intent. And I would say, well, that's not what I meant, or I didn't explain myself very well. And then I would go back and elaborate, and then that would trigger more questions. So when the book finally came out, and Scott had a gift for, like I say, a diary would have been very boring, but he created chapters that made it for interesting reading. And then Philip added the added ingredient of, when I would do a chapter, he would then take the recording and put it to type, and then send it back to me, and reading what somebody, in other words, he heard something that maybe wasn't necessarily what I was saying. You know, you think that you explain yourself well, and I've got a college education, but you know, he would hear things that were, that's not what I meant, and I would have to clarify, and then his questions would trigger other things. So that's why when the whole thing was said and done, and I know Scott as an author, you know, likes to have his name on there, and I said to him, I said, I just feel a responsibility to Philip that he added so much to it that he's earned it to be on there, and it was important to me, because the end result was, yes, it was my life story, but it was three people telling it on my side, and then things that I didn't explain very well, and things that, got left out. And when the book finally was done, it was incredibly something that I was very proud of.
Okay. My question is for Luke. You were part of one of the most hated tag teams of all time, and you were part of one of the most beloved tag teams of all time. Obviously, the sheep herders and, of course, the Bushwhackers. Which was more rewarding, being the hated heels or the beloved faces?
That's a simple question. If you're looking at this, I don't know whether I'm going to quote some here because I've got some staunch NWA guys beside me. But as NWA, you were a wrestler. When Vince took you, he made you a celebrity. He turned it around, and you did, Sportsman of the Year dinners, you do toy show functions, you do a lot of other functions away, because he was trying to draw those sort of people into the wrestling scene. So he got you on talk shows, and a lot of other things and that. And of course, merchandise-wise, money, it all helped. And there was a big difference. And I had a lot of people say, how could you go from being, the most hated blood and guts tag team to comical? And that was easy. Dollars. If you're a businessman, you've got to look at that side of things. And of course, too, we're getting older, and Vince said, this will be easier on your bodies. And that was that.
You learn to work smart.
Yes.
Did Harlem Heat ever wrestle the Bushwhacker?
No. Thank God.
Stop it.
So first of all, folks, big round of applause so far for the panelists. And we're going to go, I'll share this, we're going to go about 10 or 15 minutes longer, okay? We'll cut this a little shorter than was planned, but I think it's because we're getting such a great interaction and great responses. But what I'll do is first talk about this. Using these panel discussions is one of the most important things we do as part of the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, because it's not just the people who are here in the room, we're recording this for posterity and for history's purpose. And everything that gets talked about here then gets further researched and delved into, and it becomes learning opportunities that expand just beyond what's happening here today. So who knows, in a decade from now, someone might be watching this and diving a little bit deeper. So what I want to do, though, is we'll start with Luke and go down the entire panel and give everyone the opportunity to answer this question. And if it leads to other conversations, please take it and go with it. But I'll ask this last question and turn it over to you, the professionals, the people who are far better at this than any of us could be. Pro wrestling and life is about moments. Okay, and I could ask you your favorite match or whatever else, but it's not always a match. Maybe it was a promo. JJ, when you saw Dusty going out and you said hard times, and you mentioned those two words, and we study that today. You were either a witness or you were part of some great moments in the history of professional wrestling. So I'm going to start with Luke and work our way down the panel to Dan. And Dan, it's up to you what you want to do to wrap it up or keep it going, but we'll start with Luke. And if you could tell the crowd, and make sure that we're telling everyone here, what are some of the greatest moments you saw?
Your highlights? Well, one of the biggest highlights was the last show in the Wembley Stadium in London, and I think it was 92. It was with the Bulldog against Brett. Right? We were the opening match on the card. The arena held 90,000 or something, and the other had 94,000 plus in there. And we were the first match. And to fill a place up like that takes about 2 hours, right? Maybe in that. So the people are dying to see something. And we had a great partner for this match. Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So there was a ho, and then there was the Bushwhackers, the whoa and the yay, and we went out to that ring, and then we went into the ropes, went to 1 rope, 2 ropes, 3 ropes, and everyone in the arena was doing the noise too. And boy, that's, it was incredible. The aura in that arena was, you can't explain how it was. And we did a simple match with high spots with Duggan and everything. It just, the roof lifted, even though it was open air. Anyhow, my second great experience, well, it was before that, it was an MSG in the 80s when Hulkamania and WrestleMania was running wild, and we were in a battle royal. I don't think the other gimmick that Pat Patterson started hadn't happened yet. So it was a battle royal, and the last person to come to the ring in that battle royal was Hulk Hogan. And you can imagine the electricity in that building. Butch put his mouth in my ear and talked to me, and I couldn't hear him. You know what I mean? I think the hair stood on my arms. That's how electrifying it was back in the 80s with the wrestling. It was wild. Now, different highlights I work with which now I look back and I say, hell, people don't believe that I work with, over Australia and New Zealand, I worked with The Rock's grandfather, High Chief Peter Maivia, in Australia and New Zealand, and Butch was lucky to go and work for the 10th anniversary, independence anniversary in Samoa against Peter Maivia. And of course, we wrestled The Rock all over, the Rocky Johnson all over the place. Now here's another guy too, Stu Hart. There's not many people left alive said they wrestled Stu Hart. But Butch and me worked with him, and of course Walter, who I met in 1965 in Australia, Walter Kowalski, well-known in New York, well-known in this state, selling out the Madison Square Gardens from the 50s right up to the late 70s. Walter Kowalski. We trained China and Hunter and all that. We worked with him. And he helped us. Walter helped us a lot back in the 60s and the 70s. He was a gentleman. But what a great heel. There's some of the guys I met when I look back now and say who helped us on this journey. And it was a long journey to get to that Hall of Fame.
Moments. I got into business in 1990, and 3 years later I was at WCW, and I was on the set with the Shockmaster. And I'm like, how'd I get here, My first pay-per-view, I'm in the main event, in my hometown in Houston, Texas. I'm like, what a moment, how'd this happen? Had so much fun in this business. I guess my greatest moment, for me is going to be becoming King Booker, because a lot of people don't realize, when you get a character like that, it could be a curse. It could be an asterisk on your career. You was making a fool of yourself and looking stupid all the time. Wearing a crown and a cape and a scepter. It's just a stupid gimmick when you think about it. Right. Yeah, but for me, I wanted to take that character and create something to where it would never be able to be done again without people thinking about King Booker first. So I think as well as, that moment for me, these guys gonna rip on me a little bit, but having my wife with me, it was awesome. It was the best time in my career. My wife and I, the moments that we've had. I remember sleeping in the car. I think we were in somewhere in New York. We had about 5 hours before we had to catch a flight, and right by the hotel room. And I was like, maybe let's just get a hotel room. And Charmel go, let's just sleep in the car. I was like, that's my girl. We have to save some money here. So that time in my career, nothing will ever be compared to those moments that my wife and I, and Finley and Regal, oh man, what a time in my career. Those were the moments.
Booker, real quick, I have a question for you. When they first came to you with that idea, with the King Booker idea, what were your initial thoughts? I mean, did you think this was going to be money, or were you like, oh no, this is dumb, or?
I thought it was stupid. No, I thought it literally, it could be one of those things where that's what you remember as you know, being like I say, someone playing a stupid character. But I wanted, my goal when I became King Booker was to, humble every peasant in the WWE. And it was because of all those karate movies I saw when I was a kid, And the theme was, you always had the one leader in the karate movies. And then you had all the underneath guys who worked for the leader. And then you had the good guy. And the good guy would come over and he'd beat all the underneath guys, just beat them up like nothing. And then he would have to fight the top guy. And then he realized, oh, that's why he's the top guy. He's bad. So I just used those same concepts to become King Booker, and I swear it worked perfectly.
I think I'm best remembered as a manager because that was a chapter in my career that was towards the latter years. And it was something that I was very comfortable doing because interviews were a big part of what made me successful. And so, being a manager towards the end of my career, starting with Archie Goldie, who was just a phenomenal drawing card. And it was something that I enjoy doing. But I go back to, I was born and raised in Trenton, New Jersey. And this is before cable television, and the magazines were important because it was the one way that I knew what was going on in the New York territory, which was the land of giants at that point, but I knew little about what was going on. But there was, at that point, I think like 25 different territories around the United States, and the magazine would do reports on the different one, and so you would be able to hear about guys that some you met later in your career and some that you didn't. And I had always heard that, as I was dreaming that, going to the garden myself many times, that dreaming that maybe someday I could be there too. And it was a dream. And I had most of my success that started in the South, and then I went to Australia. I lived there for a year. I had success in Australia and New Zealand, and I finally came back. And one of my dreams was hoping that someday I could work under the knowledge umbrella of Eddie Graham, because I remember Dr. Jerry and Eddie Graham, and Dr. Jerry was, as I found out later, kind of a goofball, but he was the one that smoked a cigar, and he was the one that did all the talking, and he was very flamboyant. And he would jump into a lake with all his clothes on, and everybody would go ha ha ha, and then of course standing next to him, the stoic one was Eddie Graham, that never spoke, never said anything, just stood there. And then as you get on the other side and you're in the business, I kept hearing more and more about the genius of Eddie, and thinking that maybe someday I can somewhere, and Eddie ended up in Florida and was a principal owner in the Florida territory, and I went all over the world. I spent a year in Australia, and I enjoyed great success, but there was always that time of that, would I never get that opportunity to be with Eddie Graham. And finally, I got a chance to go to Florida and to be around Eddie, and I had a small office with one desk in there, and it was a narrow hallway, and there was a lounge chair in the corner, and Eddie would come in sometimes and that door would open and I would see him. It was like magical time for me that I wanted Eddie to sit down, and I didn't want to engage in any conversation because I wanted to make him talk about anything and everything and whatever he wanted to talk about. And he really was. He had a 7th grade education. Dr. Jerry Graham was the one in the spotlight, but Eddie Graham was a true genius and had a greater impact on me personally than anybody else in my whole career. But I wanted it, and I finally got to work for Eddie in Florida. And it was a long way to get there, and it continued me with even all what success I had and all my years of experience. Now I was with Eddie Graham in Florida, and I had a small office with a single desk, and there was like one lounge chair in the corner. Like I say, when I would see Eddie coming, it was like, you know, I would light up inside, and when Eddie would sit down, I didn't want to engage in conversation with him. I wanted to sit there and make him say whatever was on his mind, because whatever he wanted to talk about, I was going to benefit from, because he really was a true genius. And one of those conversations, I said to him, I said, you know, Eddie, I said, I'm born and raised in Trenton, New Jersey, and I used to go up to Madison Square Garden in New York, and I said, I used to see Dr. Jerry Graham and Eddie Graham, and Jerry Graham was the flamboyant one with a cigar and did all the talking, and they would ride in a convertible, you know, with his hair flowing, and Eddie hardly ever said anything. And then I said, it wasn't until I got my foot on the other side and over the years to find out that, you know, that Jerry was looked upon by most of the people in the industry as a goofball, even though he drew a lot of money, and the true genius was Eddie Graham. And now here I am back in Florida, and I'm under the Eddie Graham learning tree. And when I talked to him one day about Madison, that I had been all over the world. I'd been to Boston Garden, Maple Leaf Garden, Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis, the Cow Palace in San Francisco. I wrestled in Australia on top for a year, in New Zealand, but I had never wrestled in Madison Square Garden. And there are more famous arenas, but if you're in the industry as long as I was and where I came from, it was like Madison Square Garden was the deal. And Madison Square Garden actually was not a single location that was there for all these years, that the garden bounced around to different places.
Three times.
Three times, okay. 3 times in Madison Square Garden. And so,
but you got there.
I got there. That's the story. One of the times when Eddie came in, and I didn't have an agenda in the conversation. It just kind of came out in the conversation, talking about all those times when I went to New York and saw Dr. Jerry and Eddie, it was exciting because Jerry just drew all the attention. And I said it wasn't until I got on the other side of the business that I realized that I was seeing an unbelievable scenario where the silent one standing there was the true genius in our whole industry, that everybody was hoping at some point that they could be around Eddie Graham and learn something.
What was the match though that you had at the Garden? Because I know you made it to the Garden.
Yeah, that was, I finally was waiting for my opportunity to come to Florida as a booker, because I started when my full-time wrestling was started when I went for Jim Crockett Sr. in Charlotte, and I was months from my 28th birthday, and just having my first real professional match, and I wasn't a kid. And then as time went by, I'm thinking, well, chances are that I'll never go to New York and be in Madison Square Garden, which would have kind of been special because, yes, Boston Garden, Maple Leaf Garden in Toronto, and Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis and the Cal Palace in San Francisco. I had a chance to appear in all these arenas and spent a year in Australia and worked in New Zealand, but had never been to Madison Square Garden. And so, I get,
It's okay, it's all right. But you made it to the garden, you had a match.
yeah, that was the thing where Eddie came in one day and just, I didn't have, it wasn't something that I was waiting for the opportunity to talk to him about it. It just, he made it easy to have conversation. It was more listening than it was conversation on my part. But I happened to mention that how many times I go into the garden to see Dr. Jerry, that find one and Eddie Graham, and then find out that the true genius of that combination was Eddie Graham. And now here I am in Florida. I'm under the learning tree, continuing after all my years of business and traveling the world. And here I was finally where I would have a conversation with Eddie Graham. And in one of those conversations, I said all the times that I went to the garden to see Dr. Jerry and Eddie Graham, dreamed that maybe the kid from Trenton, New Jersey that fell in love with the business could someday be in the garden myself. And I said, you know, at that point I was in the twilight of my career. I was booking and I was just wrestling as not full-time. And it's like anything, whether you're a baseball player or whatever you are, your skill level is at its peakest when you're every night, you know, whether you're a baseball player or a wrestler. And wrestling, you know, 2 nights a week or 3 nights a week, you know, you have skill levels that you can get by, but you're never at your absolute best, at least in your own mind. And so that one conversation with Eddie when he came in that day, and I said, you know, all the times that I went to the garden and dreamed that someday maybe I could wrestle myself in Madison Square Garden in New York.
He and Vince were very close?
Yep,
Did he
and that's the next part of the story. Eddie just listened, but
made it happen?
he never said anything more than that. The only comment I heard him make was, so if you had wrestled in the garden, that would have been something that would have been special to me. Yeah, I just threw that yeah. Well, Eddie, at that point, Vince McMahon Sr. he was in the summer months in Delaware, Rehoboth Beach. He had a home there, and in the winter months he would be in Florida, and he would have a home down in Fort Lauderdale, and that's, you know, he would come to Florida. And so I'm Eddie in that conversation just said, the only thing he said, oh, if you'd had a chance to go to the garden, that would have been special to you. Yeah, I guess it would have. And because it came out that I never, all these other arenas, but never got to the garden.
But you finally made it to the garden, was that?
Bill, we got 5 minutes, and I need you and Dan to
Okay.
answer the
Okay,
question.
so Eddie left.
Called Vince,
And
and you got into the garden.
And Vince remembered me from when I was a referee
All right.
out of college.
All
And
right.
he said, we're going to make that dream come true. And the next day Eddie comes in and he said, there was a date, like October 10th. He said, circle that date. And he said, don't book yourself the day before or the day after. And he said, you're going to the garden.
That's great. That's great. Good one for JJ again. So mine very briefly, and most people know this story, and I'll tell it briefly. I fortunately, because you were talking how about the business changed, I'm the guy who had an angle that Vince McMahon told Jerry Laurel that he wished he was booked. Vince McMahon Sr. is backstage with all the people there, and hanging around is Andy Kaufman. And Andy Kaufman knew me from the magazines, and he wanted to wrestle at the Garden. He wanted to wrestle anyone. Vince Sr. came over to me, he says, listen, I know the guy's talking to you, he's nice, we're not interested in this whole entertainment thing. I said, okay. So Andy says to me, what are you doing after the matches? I said, I'm taking the E-train back to my house in Queens. He said, can I go with you? He's the biggest star on TV, Taxi, right? So he's riding with me on the subway. And people go, oh, that's Andy Kaufman. We get to my apartment. I'm living with Susan Sexton, the Australian girl champion who was in New York. We shared an apartment. And she used to be F-bombed for everything. She says, oh, hi, mate. Hey, F and Andy Kaufman, how you doing? So we're sitting on the couch for an hour or longer, and all he's talking about is he wants to be Fred Blassie, he wants to be Buddy Rogers. He goes, oh, let me tell you, pal, pencil neck geek. And finally, Suzanne has had enough of wrestling. She slams the door, goes in the bedroom, puts on her headphones, listening to the Ramones, Gabba Gabba Hey. I said, listen, I got this friend down in Memphis. His name is Jerry Lawler. That territory is like the Frankenstein monster, the Wolfman. He said, when can we call him? I said, now. He said, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. I said, listen, we're wrestling people. We're up all night. We call Jerry Lawler, and he says, you got Andy Kaufman, the guy from Taxi, in your roach-infested apartment? I said, yes. And I put him on the phone, and that put the key in the ignition to that thing, which is rated in the old TV Guide as one of the top 10 TV moments that will, and I was the guy who put the key in the ignition for that thing. I had nothing to do with the angle, and Andy and I stayed close friends up until about 2 years before he died. He stopped calling people, but he would call the wrestling magazine office, Kevin, every day, and the editors would say, get off the phone, we have work to do. And he took his Tanaka this, his Fuji this. So that was what we did, kicked off really sports and entertainment, and Vince told Jerry Lawler, that's the one angle I wish I would have done. Yeah. Dan Severn.
Okay, so the question I think originally was greatest moment and least greatest moment. I think probably was the initial question.
Greatest moments, but let's hear your least greatest moment.
To jump into greatest moment was by 1998. I have the two biggest professional wrestling companies in the world. They're fighting over me. I got WCW and WWF fighting over me, and basically I cut the contract I wanted because I did not want to be exclusive. I was already working for the NWA. I brought a great deal of notoriety to the NWA. I had to convince I'm working for the Ultimate Fighting Championships. It's the first time a professional wrestling belt has ever been carried out in my entourage. The NWA belt was carried out to the octagon cage. The only time it has ever been carried out to the cage. And I had to do a lot of convincing and educating to the UFC staff and the owners at that point in time that you don't have to worry about Dan Severn being a goofball or trying to bring any kind of shame or embarrassment to you guys at all. I said I would do it all with class. And even the other gentleman I had in my entourage at that point in time, I go, you guys are the show. Because I had 4 guys and they were, because it was part professionals, and these guys were all dressed up in stars and stripe outfits. They had Dan Severn t-shirts in there, and they're swinging around, and I have Dennis Carluzzo. He's the last guy, he's carrying the NWA belt out there with this. I go, you 4 men, and Dennis right behind us. I go, you just keep people away from me. I said, you guys are the show. I've got to kick 3 men's asses tonight. I said, if I don't do that, this all blows up in our face. So I said, just keep people away from me because I'm going to be concentrated, SOB at that point in time. It happened, and here I am sitting inside the octagon cage after match number 3, holding up both UFC title belt and NWA title belt. So again, that was a great moment. Like I said, and then by 1998, I got 2 different biggest professional companies that are fighting over me for this and that, and cutting the contract that I wanted, and but if you want, the hard times was 1992-ish, I should say, right around that 1992-ish, going into the Ultimate Fighting Championships. I basically had left my coaching. Again, amateur wrestling, I coached at both Arizona State, Michigan State, left the coaching ranks, was doing it for there's other stories that are involved with it, but it's kind of like going, I was trying to do the best aspect here. I moved to Coldwater, Michigan because of a job opportunity. And the gentleman that told me about all these job opportunities, he said all the things that a young man wanted to hear, that had a wife and had children and all this profit sharing, the whole 9 yards. And I went to work, and at the end of the first week, I did not have a job. And I even bought a bigger home and everything, all based upon this salary and stuff like that. And so I'm thinking, and this was a recessionary period of time for the United States. And I remember seeing a Tough Man brochure. Winner gets $1,000. I needed $1,000. Okay? I had never been in a fight at that point in time, just a competitor. And here I am at a Tough Man contest. Tough Man is a Friday and Saturday type competition. Friday you do one match, and Saturday, whoever else is left, you finish it on out. There's only 2 weight classes in Tough Man, 190 pounds and under, and anything over. I was in the anything over. And a lot of these other gentlemen, when they were coming to the contest, they were wearing boxing shorts or athletic garb and stuff like this, and boxing shoes. Here I show up with amateur wrestling shoes, which they kind of look like boxing shoes, and I was wearing an amateur wrestling singlet. I don't know how to hold my hands, because I never put on boxing gloves at that point in time. But I'm going up to say 300 plus pounder. But I always also started my professional training because I was pursuing aggressively professional wrestling. I was pursuing aggressively anything and everything because I got to keep a roof over the head of my family, and I got to keep food on the table. And I'd already started my training in professional wrestling. I'm going up against this 300 plus pounder. He's throwing a couple of haymakers at me. I hit him in the chest with both gloves. I got him running backwards. And we're about to hit the ropes. And I know what's about to happen. The ropes are going to go out so far, and then I'm going to feel inertia coming right back in. The moment I felt in, I locked him right around the body. I threw a belly to belly. Launched him through the air. Crowd explodes. Because they had never seen this at a Tough Man contest. And you got the owner of the Tough Man contest. I can't allude his name eludes me right now. He actually he sees this happen. He grabs the microphone. He looks like Wolfman Jack at that point in time, and he looks at me. I look right down at him. He goes, "Well, throw him again." I go, "Game on! I can do this." Okay, I can't fight someone, but I can throw him around.
All right, I think that's going to do it for our panel discussion this afternoon. Everybody, thank you for joining us today. My name is Mike Powell.